All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We just had the most significant vote of the session regarding LGBT rights, and maybe the most significant vote that we've had in a number of years. The time for rancorous debates, for preaching, for arm twisting are over. It is time to vote. It's time to put things into action. We just had a vote on that House floor that would prohibit discrimination in the workplace against people who are gay, lesbian, and transgendered. And I want to thank the 7 Republicans who joined the House Democrats in attempting to make workplace discrimination against the LGBT community prohibited here in the state of Indiana. That is a move in the right direction. Now, this issue hasn't been put to rest. Candidly, this is a pretty good whip count. This shows you how far that the public needs to push some of its representatives to bring our laws in line with the attitudes and beliefs of the people, and certainly the growing attitudes and beliefs of those who will be leading our state in future generations. So it's a good thing we had the vote today, but that is a beginning rather than an end, and I trust that some of these folks who haven't yet come around to the right side of history are going to have an opportunity to see things a different way. A couple other matters I want to remark on. We should leave this session with some infrastructure reinvestment legislation. Candidly, I don't think that this is this hard to do. I have been led to believe that there are intense disagreements between the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans. I don't understand why, other than that there must be some egos involved. But in order to put together a package that would have strong bipartisan support in both chambers and be signed off on by the governor, not extraordinarily difficult in my view. I mean, I think you can take pieces of the Senate Republican plan, of the House Democrat plan, maybe some specific elements of what Senate Democrats and House Republicans have proposed, who put it together, and it would have broad bipartisan support. Best of all, it would be possible to do that without having any tax increases on consumers this year. And it would be of significance. And I hope that that is not the reason that we're going to stay in session all the way till March 10th. Because this isn't a difficult deal to put together. At the same time, if the reason we're going to stay in session till March 10th is to continue to expand the voucher system and to tinker with education, then the Speaker might want to look at some very much earlier dates for adjournment. The call that I made on the opening day of session with respect to the children, the parents, the administrators, the teachers, is just stop doing harm. Leave these educational systems that we have created alone for a couple of years so we can ascertain whether they are succeeding or failing. And now we're here seeing a bill in committee where they want to continue to complicate the 3 education systems that we have here in the state, which is, of course, the traditional system with our traditional public schools, the charter schools, which are deregulated, and the voucher schools. And they want to muddy that even more. That is not something that should be aggravated and inflamed this year. Give the people a chance to decide how these things are working. I said that on day one, and I continue to say that. In this case, conservative with the small c is in order. Restraint is what's important. So here's where we have to go. We know where people as of today stand on the civil rights issue, and that's important for economic development. We should keep working on it. Roads reinvestment, not hard to figure out if we can get the egos out of the way. And third thing, do no more harm on education. If we can make progress on the one, exhibit common sense on the second, restraint on the third, there's a possibility for a halfway decent session. But with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Speaker Bosman says on a straight LGBT rights bill and a straight up or down vote on an LGBT rights bill, more Republicans vote yes, and that some of their objection was to do something this big on a second reading amendment without public testimony isn't proper.
That is, respectfully to the speaker, that's just ridiculous. This is one of the most widely debated issues in the state of Indiana. If you don't have clear views on it now, I don't know what you're working on. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it plastered the state of Indiana all over the national news. You mean to tell me you don't know what you think? And they also know that at least when initiated by the minority party, it is going to come via amendment. Because those of you who have reported on this chamber for some time know what happens when you introduce a bill that people don't want to discuss. Then you don't get to discuss it. This is how you do get to discuss it. And by the way, they've heard from constituents, they've heard from advocates, and by the way, we're not even getting into the bathroom issue with this amendment. Isn't that what gets everyone stirred up? What are we going to do with the potty police? What are we going to do with bathrooms? This is about something on which there's broad agreement, I thought, at least in the public, which is you shouldn't be fired or from your job or discriminated against for no other reason than being gay or transgendered. And they had by the way, 7 Republicans over there figured out that it was the route to go. I'm honestly a little surprised by some of them that voted no. I really am.
On the regional cities issue, Bosma said that there aren't enough Republican votes to get it out of Ways and Means right now due to annoyance with the fact that the administration basically spent more than you guys gave them. Do you know where the Democrats on the committee stand on that? Would you guys support the regional cities bill, or do you also have concerns?
If they come and ask for votes, we might have an idea or two. That has to happen first.
He also suggested that it might make sense to pass that bill if it was combined with the House road funding.
Well, they can wrap up and put bows on whatever they want. But their problems with the House road funding bill are the same no matter what they package it with. I mean, they have to they have to deal with the distinguished gentlemen across the hall who have different ideas about things.
Is the debate around LGBT rights the reason that the bias crimes bill is dead in the House?
I don't know. I certainly hope not, because that's one that everybody wants to see pass. And I'm going to say this here too. If that is the reason they're holding up the bias crimes bill, I wish they would ask me about that too, because we want to help make sure that passes. It's important to a lot of our members, and it has been for a number of years.
You said a roads and infrastructure compromise shouldn't be too hard to figure out. What do you see as the way? What do you predict would be the way forward on that?
Well, I would have several different ideas, and I'm just going to give an example for illustration purposes. Not that I'm necessarily proposing it, but I think what House Democrats propose with moving over the sales tax on gasoline is very popular. The people think it makes sense. We propose doing it all at once, but if they want to do it in increments, that would be understandable. You combine that and releasing some of the reserves from the local income taxes, as the Senate Republicans propose doing. And if you want to increase flexibility for local units of government, I think there's a way to those aren't all perfect to me, but I think there's a way forward on that stuff that would be palatable. Because I've said all along, I hope that there's a infrastructure reinvestment bill here that we can all support. It's got to pass muster with the 2 majorities, and that includes those folks over there in the Senate. And it has to be broadly palatable to the people of Indiana. I just think I think there's a fairly simple consensus bill that can be moved forward, and the governor would probably be happy to sign. And they might do well to give the governor a victory on something.
You said no consumer tax increases. The Lung Association and related groups are here this week saying, forget road funding, cigarette tax increase is good on its merits for health reasons. Is that something the caucus would go for?
Look, I've supported cigarette tax increases in the past, and so have many of my colleagues. But there's nothing ideological about that. Those are empirical questions. And anytime you go to increase any revenue source. You have to do so with some degree of hesitation. And you have to look at the economic consequences, and you have to look at the policy consequences like you started out. But to use cigarette revenue for the purposes that they have laid out is a little bit unprecedented. But you know, I'm never going to say never on that particular thing. That's a matter of whether it makes sense at the time you're doing it. But it should be approached carefully. And I think even short of that, there's a lot of major positive things that can be done on infrastructure that don't require any new taxes. And we got to remember too, we got to get this thing around the governor. Okay, they don't talk about him enough with respect to this. He's got that veto pen, and I thought he was pretty clear in his State of the State. You know, he's running for re-election, and whether it's a cigarette tax or not, it sounds to me like he doesn't want that on his resume. So we've got to be, you know, we want to get money into roads quickly, and if we're waiting around to do veto overrides and all that stuff, and then the Republicans are fighting with each other, you know, yelling at each other from the third floor down to the second floor, and they're leaning over the balcony and, you know, cursing at each other, that's not going to get us potholes filled.
Given that it seems like you now know where the LGBT issue stands in this chamber, will this be the last try at an amendment that you go for this?
Oh, we'll look at, but this was just, but bear in mind, this was narrowly on employment. I mean, it was broad in its scope in terms of to whom it applied, but it was about employment. There's other areas of discrimination concerns. You know, housing is one, and we'll have to look at the opportunities that are available and take them one at a time. But I think that, again, they're not doing themselves any favors by just continuing to sidestep the issue. I am grateful that there was a vote today, but these just aren't issues that go away. You've got to grapple with them, frankly.
Are we going to see more amendments?
I'm certainly not ruling that out. You know, it's just that those are, we have to look and see what opportunities there are for reasonable amendments and go from there. That depends on what comes out of committee and what's on the calendar. I'd love to be able to throw a vehicle bill out there, but they haven't given the minority leader that power. If they do, I'll do that one.
You said they need to ask on regional cities. Is that something the state should do, put more money into that?
You know what, I think the regional city stuff can do some good things, but it's going to depend. It's an execution problem. I have to check it, but I'm fairly certain I supported the bill as it passed, and I think there's great potential in it. And I do agree that our cities and our regions are engines for economic development here in Indiana. But what's going to matter is how well they do it. And because not everyone is being helped equally, is it going to become a program to reward friends and punish heretics? You know, that's kind of what I've been looking at, or keeping a watchful eye on. But you know, if they're having trouble on that Ways and Means Committee, we're always willing to work with the majority, but that's predicated on the allowance for the expression of certain views that are well received. And I'm not even submitting to you what those are at the moment, you know, because we're a team here.
Was it appropriate for the executive director of Mike Pence's school board to edit a report on ISTEP validity?
Well, raise my eyebrow. I'm not sure if it was my right or left eyebrow, but it did raise one of them. I think it's a little. It bothers me. It bothers me a little bit. And what bothered me, it wasn't. There weren't numerical changes or data changes, from what I understand. There were changes in the narrative. It's hard for me to understand what the obsession with that storytelling was.
State Democratic Party called for the guy to be fired. Do you believe that?
I don't, you know, I'm agnostic on that point yet. I think that the governor needs to carefully assess who's serving them well and who isn't. I'm not sure he was particularly well served in that particular instance.
You were talking about Republicans cursing at each other, and that makes me think of the Senate race. And Marlon Stutzman. Marlon Stutzman's been criticized for filing this petition for a recount. Do you think that he's being a bad Republican, or what do you think about that?
No, I don't think he's being a bit. I was shocked that a candidate for the U.S. Senate would fall short in the area of signatures. I mean, we've had this system for quite some time. It's not easy to do, but it's certainly surmountable for a competently run campaign, which is necessary for somebody who is going to serve a 6-year term in one of the nation's legislative bodies, which has a say over international treaties, and which confirms one of the 9 people that make up a co-equal branch of government. I don't think it's too much to ask to maybe make sure you get 600 signatures instead of just 500. I mean, it kind of reminds me of students that do the bare minimum to pass freshman chemistry. I don't understand why they set the bar so low for themselves. And Marlon Stutzman, I served with him. He's a very decent fellow, and I think he's entitled to use the election laws as they exist. It's not too much to ask somebody to follow the law. And by the way, people act like this particular regulation is confusing. You ask anybody around here, they know you got to go get these signatures. You know why? Because whenever people start talking about running for one of these big shot offices, the first thing they talk about is, oh boy, but I got to go get those signatures. They know what they have to do.
The Senate Education Committee removed a provision from one of the education bills that would have allowed the state board to do a rescore of the 2015 I-STEP test. Do you think that should have stayed in, or are you happy that that's removed?
That rescore was potentially going to be costly, and I don't know what it really was gaining us at this point, other than to do rescores and re-rescores for what's essentially a moot point based on some of the legislation that passed at the beginning of session. It just calls into question whether that several $1 million could be better used somewhere else. But you know what? That is the kind of item that you're going to see in conference committee, and I'm fascinated to see who will win, because I'm sometimes not always the fly on the wall in some of these Republican discussions. I can only look at the results and extrapolate. I don't always get to hear directly.
Are you confident, given that computer glitch, that students got the correct scores that they deserve?
How can we hire people to do this work? There's a certain point where you have to trust that they're doing a reasonable job or giving you the right answer. If I could go in there and rescore it myself, I might have my own conclusions, but I'm not capable of doing that.
Should the legislature bother to confirm the lieutenant governor nominee since there is an election coming up?
I've asked that question in private, and if there's any Supreme Court vacancies, I wonder about that as well.
There is.
So I think that the governor might want to ask himself whether he wants to be philosophically consistent or not. I'm not aware that he's uttered anything regarding the replacement of Justice Scalia, but if he's sympathizing with it, he might want to check his motives. Yeah, I think that Dan, that question has entered my head, and I'm going to meditate on it, and I may have further response.
Assuming that vote does take place, do you expect it to be unanimous?
I went and checked the record from when Kathy Davis was confirmed as lieutenant governor after the death of Governor O'Bannon and the ascension of Governor Kernan to the office. It was done via voice vote, believe it or not. So I'm actually going to have some discussion with the speaker about how he intends to handle it. I just want to say, now obviously I'm going to be supporting the Democratic team come the election. That shouldn't be any surprise. But, you know, unless there's something very extreme, I generally think the chief executives ought to be able to pick their number two. And that's, you know, whether there's a huge point to be made about disagreements we're going to have in the election. I'm not sure that necessarily serves any purpose at this point in time, but you know, we're reviewing that. We're reviewing that.
Do you want a roll call?
Well, again, I don't have strong feelings about it at the moment. I want to, you know, I need time to listen and learn myself. But I do say when Lieutenant Governor Davis entered office, she was afforded courtesy, and I like to receive courtesy and repay courtesy when possible.